Hello and welcome to a Showdown breakdown, NFC West style. Matthew Stafford versus Jimmy Garoppolo. My name is Adam Levitan, as always joined by Cody Main and Gary Hartman. Happy Monday Night Football. Cody, how's it going?
Happy Monday night. We're coming off it was a fun Sunday night showdown. We correctly called that game going over its total. We saw KC and Tampa Bay kind of get back to their past happy ways, and that was fun. Hopefully we'll get a repeat of that tonight, though I'm not expecting that to happen.
Oh no, this is a mess. This is a mess. Gary, how's it going?
Yeah, man, the more things change, the more they stay the same. We thought we'd get a Trey Lance 49ers team with this NFC West matchup, but instead it's a repeat of the NFC championship here with Garoppolo and Stafford, and more of a slog, but could be fun.
Yeah, and the thing about it is there's some really good players in this game. Now, they're guys who I think people are frustrated with: Allen Robinson, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Matthew Stafford, Cam Akers. But there's good players in this game. The way these teams play, though, and the way they play defense doesn't set up as well for shootout potential. Cody, how do you think about this game from a macro point of view?
Yeah, sifting through this was kind of a nightmare. The guy that stands out off the top, obviously, is Cooper Kupp with his insane role, insane floor ceiling combination. But there, as you mentioned, there's a ton of guys that you can get yourself excited for if we get the right type of game script. But it is kind of messy. The salaries are kind of messy as well. And as you kind of start to look through the roster utilization projections, we're going to see a lot of San Francisco heavy teams tonight because of the way the salaries interact with one another. We have, highly projected 4-2 usage on this slate, and a lot of that's because of the salary saving coming from the San Francisco side. So I think just from the jump, we're going to see a lot of like Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford with a combination of 4 San Francisco guys. So it'll be interesting to see if we can find ways with the Rams salary and the guys kind of in the middle tier there with Robinson, Akers, Henderson, guys like that. Can we find enough floor, enough ceiling combination there to flip the script a little bit and maybe go 1-5, 2-4 and find ways to get different through our roster construction?
Yeah, it's interesting. Normally that the roster construction stuff flows through who people think are going to win the game or who people think can win and win in what way, not necessarily due to salary. But, I think I don't think people have a strong lean on who's going to win this game. And this is more salary based than we're used to. Let's talk about the quarterback position here tonight. Matthew Stafford has not, see, the thing is, I think he's played fine. He played really bad in a really tough match against Buffalo in week 1. In the 2 weeks since, I think he's been okay. But he's targeting Tyler Higbee a ton. He's not targeting Allen Robinson much. Cooper Kupp is doing his thing. They've kind of played a bit more conservative than I think people want them to. Gary, what do you think about Stafford, Garoppolo, and how they fit into the slates tonight?
Yeah, definitely much prefer Stafford overall here. And I know Cody mentioned it in the article, but I do think Stafford's probably a lock in all cash lineups. In general, though, than I am for most showdown slates. I'm less interested in the quarterbacks as a whole. I'd be playing way more Stafford than Jimmy G, but just given that, pretty low total, 2 good defenses, at least we know that San Francisco wants to be run heavy. I just think that it's more of a skill position type of night for me, the way I kind of see this one breaking down. That said, I think I'd use plenty of Stafford, but I think I'd have Kupp in every single Stafford lineup that I roll out, whether he's captain or not.
Yeah, it's interesting. Stafford, we thought maybe there'd be some slight throw more to Allen Robinson, throw more to Van Jefferson. He's been out. Throw more to Tyler. But listen, man, Cooper Kupp, he's absolutely torched the 49ers. And we'll get to Cooper Kupp when we get there. But my point is that when you're playing Stafford stuff, can you play it without Kupp stuff? I think is a question. Sounds like Gary wants to play Kupp with all his Stafford teams. Cody, what do you think about that? And anything else on quarterback?
Yeah, I think you lock Stafford with Kupp. Like any lineup that includes Kupp or any lineup that includes Matthew Stafford has to also include Cooper Kupp. I just have a hard time seeing Matthew Stafford reaching a ceiling that's going to get him into winning lineups without Kupp coming along with him. Usually I'm kind of willing to embrace the captain quarterback, especially in the stuff that I'm playing more this season, the smaller field stuff. But I just have a tough time seeing the targets being so evenly distributed that we see a Stafford captain performance ahead of Kupp or even Robinson if Robinson's able to get there through touchdowns. I just see that the pass catching cores for each of these offenses being much more likely to finish as an optimal captain, more so than the quarterbacks. And then, going back to kind of the cash consideration, I think Stafford is probably a cash game lock, and I'm always pounding the table for quarterbacks in cash games. But I think that they increased Jimmy G's price just enough that, like, I don't think Jimmy G is a cash game must with Debo where he's priced at, with some of the other options that are cheaper. So I'm okay flipping a cash team that doesn't include Jimmy G, and almost always I want both quarterbacks. So take that for what it's worth. I don't think Jimmy G is a necessity tonight.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you get the pocket quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to give you any rushing equity, right? So then you need to start thinking about volume and efficiency, and he's really not too good of a bet at either. Maybe efficiency if you can get a quick screen to Debo or to Kittle and get them moving. But yeah, then those guys are going to be the optimal captains. So yeah, it's hard to see it. It's hard for me to see these captain ownership projections, 8% and 5%, being wrong. And so it's tempting to have them in captain. But to me, it's like also hard to see them actually being the optimal captain. Like it would take some outlier game where Stafford throws, 3 touchdowns to 3 different people, et cetera, et cetera. Let's go to running back. Jeff Wilson has an awesome role. People just didn't want to believe it. Jeff Wilson has an awesome role for the 49ers. I don't think it's a particularly easy matchup. And I should note that the 49ers lost Trent Williams, and they already had a weak interior offensive line. Like, it is not great right now for the 49ers offensive line. Still, they're going to try to run. They're going to try to run a lot. Jeff Wilson's going to be the man. On the other side, Cam Akers, I think, continues to move ahead of Darrell Henderson on early downs. On pass downs is still Darrell Henderson's job. I do think around the goal line, they prefer Akers. Not to say they won't use Henderson there, but they prefer Akers. Gary, what do you think about the running back spots tonight?
Yeah, neither for matchup wise, it's not good for any of these guys, really, right? I mean, the Rams have been strong against the run for a long time. That looks to have continued this year. Same thing with San Francisco. I think I'm with Cody in what he broke down, that, in a vacuum, I'd prefer Henderson straight up to Akers when you take into account price, maybe, full point PPR on DraftKings as well. But I'm not super excited about either of those guys. Wilson's just a little pricey. But yeah, I mean, the role, as you mentioned, is really good. So I would have plenty of these guys, but I wouldn't be forcing anyone like so far over the field here. I don't think any of these guys are slate breaking tonight.
Yeah. I mean, I've been low on Cam Akers all offseason. Obviously, the week 1 stuff was a bit of a blip. He is back to the feature back role, but he still doesn't have it completely, and just still is so inefficient. I'm not even sure it's his fault. I mean, it's partially his fault, but this run game is like absolutely broken. And that's not to say that he's not okay on Showdown, but it's hard for me to see it. Cody, what do you think about this? And one thing about this slate too, there's just not that many deep places to go at running back. There's not like the pure pass catching punt that we can play for 1,100 or whatever and get there. Maybe you could try Juszczyk. Maybe you could try Jordan Mason, but that's super thin. Any more thoughts on running back, Cody?
Yeah, 1 point quick on Juszczyk. He's 1K. He's got a decent base projection, which he will across the industry. We're projecting 8.6% ownership, which will likely hold in like the large field stuff, as people will cap their exposures, and in the casuals aren't going to be clicking on Juszczyk. But in some of the stuff that I was playing last night, like the power sweep, we saw Rachaad White get up to like 18% there because he was kind of the $600 min price punt that made everything work. With so many studs to pay up for, as we'll get to with receivers and even some of these running backs, you're going to see a pretty hefty Kyle Juszczyk ownership in like the smaller field stuff. So just keep that in mind when you're going through and trying to avoid dupes and things like that. He's going to be pretty heavily owned in those contests. The matchup stuff is what's concerning most for me on both of these backfields. I love the Jeff Wilson role, but I have question marks about how effective they can be without Trent Williams and against this pretty stout LA rush defense. On the other side, I do think that as a way to get unique, as a way to be a little bit contrarian, kind of pay up to be contrarian, I think Darrell Henderson is a little bit too expensive, probably $1,000 too expensive for this role, but he is getting that pass down work, and that can rack up quickly in 1-2 minute drive, or if they do happen to fall behind. So if I'm going anywhere, I think that Henderson at sub 20% ownership is a pretty nice play.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Like you said, there's so much more value in a target than a carry. And like I do think if there's like a timeout or it's a situation, they'll get Akers in there for goal line. But if Henderson's in there and he's already rolling and they get the ball around inside the 5-yard line, I don't think they'll like yank Henderson off the field just to get Akers in there. There's still some shot he gets a touchdown. Let's go to wide receiver. I mean, Cooper Kupp, man. Cooper Kupp is just absolutely out of control. Got a rushing touchdown last week. Didn't have a huge, was held under 90 yards for just like the third time in his last 24 games last week in terms of receiving, but did get there on the rushing touchdown stuff. The 49ers have had a hell of a time trying to stop Cooper Kupp lately. He has torched them in 3 straight games. We see 74% projected total ownership, 21% captain ownership. Cody, I think if anything, we might be light here. Like, how are people not trying to fit Cooper Kupp captains tonight at a higher rate? And maybe they will in hand builds more. I'm not sure. Like, to me, Debo 12% captain versus Cooper Kupp 21% captain. That is a no doubt windmill slam it in on Cooper Kupp. And I'm a known Debo hater. I mean, I have zero. The fade I have on Debo this year is so outrageous. I have 0 in best ball, 0 in season long, unders in props. But nevertheless, I get that people still like Debo. I'm just shocked that it would be that close. Cody, what do you think about the ownership between Kupp and Debo, and anything else on those guys?
Yeah, and I've already manually bumped it, and I could see us manually bumping it even more as we get closer to lock and kind of get a better feel for the slate in terms of manually adjusting things. But I went back and looked because we've had this Cooper Kupp roll basically for a full year, right? And LA's been on a ton of main slates, been on a ton of main primetime slates, I should say, and his average captain ownership is 17.8%. We've seen it creep up to 24 against the Cardinals last season, 26 against Tennessee, 22 against Cincinnati in the Super Bowl. Like, we expect this to keep creeping up, but the only guys that really push that 25% plus captain ownership are like the true, unicorns, the Konami code quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson. I don't know whether it's people still have question marks about the wide receiver position at captain or what it is, but I think that it will hold pretty close to that 21%. And I think he's more often optimal than the 21.5% that he's going to be owned. So I'm okay signing up for eating the chalk there at captain and finding ways to get different elsewhere. The problem is he's just like $500 too cheap, I think, at least. Maybe should be closer to 13K on the slate. So it's tough to really get away from it.
Gary, you mentioned Kupp locking with Stafford. I agree with that. On the Debo side, he scores his points in such a unique way. Like, he's been way more effective as a rusher than a receiver this season. I think when they get into close big games, and that's what this is supposed to be, you could see maybe more Debo carries than usual. That's a bit narrative-y. What do you think about Debo and anything else on the San Francisco? And then I do want to get back to LA.
Yeah, I mean, I think the unique thing about Debo is like where maybe we would normally negatively correlate somebody like him with like Ayuk or something like that on a normal slate. I think here you can negatively correlate with Jeff Wilson because, your absolute ceiling play from Debo probably does include a rushing touchdown. We're not expecting too much effective rushing between the tackles here. So I would be hard pressed to think those two guys get together. It's a 1-game slate. We don't rule anything out, but they're both expensive and they both would be eating into each other's ceilings a little bit. So from a large field GPP play, that's where I'm thinking with Debo, but I don't think Debo's a bad play on this slate. We saw him be pretty effective throughout the season with Jimmy G last year. We get that the efficiency is out of control. In a vacuum, was out of control last year. In a vacuum, I certainly prefer Kupp. And I just wanted to chime in there that, our GPP brains, and I write about this in Leverage, like especially in large field, is, oh my God, 21% or 75 total percent, 80% is a fade. That's just not the way we should be thinking. We still need to get the best plays in there. And when someone like Cooper Kupp is just so easily the best play on this slate like he is, I have no problem getting way over the 21% at captain on someone like him. But Debo's fine. I'd want to be a little under on captain while probably being, somewhere aligned in total ownership.
It's probably a hot take. I think Brandon Ayuk is just like a better pure receiver. Obviously, Debo is absolutely insane once he gets the ball. But in terms of getting open down the field, beating cornerbacks, like Brandon Ayuk to me is better. The Jimmy Garoppolo stuff is not great for him because Jimmy is so timid and wants to throw it so short. I think that does fit better with Debo, but I think Brandon Ayuk can do it on limited work. And then Juwan Jennings only plays like half the snaps, but when he comes in for like a big slot role at 2K. I'd much rather play Juwan Jennings than Kyle Juszczyk. Like, maybe that's a bad take. The Kyle Juszczyk stuff just tilts me so hard. It's like, let's leak this guy out of the backfield and hope he gets a touchdown. I guess Juwan Jennings actually has like an actual wide receiver role. Any thoughts on Ayuk, Juwan, or any other dust balls here, Cody?
I'm with you on Juwan. I think in the single entry stuff that I'm playing that he'll come, the ownerships might actually be flipped because the 1K really lets you kind of just jam in whatever you want. If you play Juszczyk, the 2K starts to make you think about things a little bit more. So I'm with you on Juwan Jennings. I would much rather play guys that have legitimate roles, and he certainly seems to have a legitimate role, albeit in this low volume passing offense. I'm kind of in on that. Ayuk is interesting. The $7,600 price tag makes him really attractive because he projects, similar base projection as guys like Matthew Stafford and Jimmy Garoppolo. They're not separated by all that much, but you get the 3K in savings there. So I am interested in Ayuk captains. I think Ayuk captain would definitely be a lock with, or at least a strong positive correlation boost with Jimmy Garoppolo in flex. Whereas, like you guys talked about with Samuel, I don't think you need to play Jimmy Garoppolo in your Deebo Samuel captain lineups.
All right. I got to bring up this Ben Skowronek thing. So, okay, Van Jefferson's out. He's the number 3 receiver. Fine. Last 2 weeks, Ben Skowronek has lined up in the backfield 29 times. Like, I don't know exactly what they're doing, but they clearly think like he has a very defined and specific role. 4,400 is a lot. I mean, it's striking to see him only 1,800 less than Allen Robinson. I don't know, man. Like, Skowronek has a very, very clear role and gets like this stuff out of the backfield that I think gets him some easy targets as well. And then the Allen Robinson situation is just feels like he can't separate, can't get open. And you guys can go back and listen. If you're a subscriber, you can go back and listen to the show I did with Matt Harmon and get his take on Allen Robinson. He thinks he's been okay, but still, to me, Allen Robinson feels like touchdown or bust more. Gary, any thoughts on Skowronek, A-Rob, Powell, or any of these other dust balls on the Rams?
I think some positive regressions coming Robinson's way. Like, he's getting the red zone targets. I get that his overall target share hasn't been what we wanted. And, as Silva noted in matchups, like there's definitely a chance he's dust here in his age 29 season, but I'm not ready to fully call it yet. And like, as a pivot to Kupp, and obviously you can play those guys together. But if you, in your lineups that you do not have Kupp, let's say the 15% that you do, or 10% that you do, I think it makes a lot of sense to have Allen Robinson in there. And then Skowronek is expensive enough where like the ownership can remain in check a little bit. And as you mentioned, the role is very pure. Like, I think it's a solid play. I don't love them as much together though, Robinson and Skowronek, because like the chances of those two guys getting there with Cooper Kupp on the field is pretty low.
Yeah. Cody, 20% Ben Skowronek. I don't think you ever, at 4,400, I don't think we could have predicted that. It seems like, he's only going to be 9% less owned than Allen Robinson. I have major concerns about Allen Robinson, but still shout out Penn State. What do you think about this whole Robinson Skowronek thing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wrote in the article, like, if I felt like I was getting paid off with a big enough ownership discount on Robinson, I would kind of be in on that. I don't know, 29% seems pretty efficient for a guy that does feel like he is a little bit touchdown or bust at this point. And I know a lot of people have talked about it. I think I saw it on from Jordan Vonek, who writes for the 33rd team, that, Robinson's getting his targets against man coverage or when defenses are blitzing. And the 49ers just aren't doing that a lot. They're playing a lot of zone, and that's going to be where Cooper Kupp is going to feast. So if you really want to dive into like the matchup data, I just feel like this isn't the spot for Allen Robinson to get right unless he just happens to fall in the end zone. And at 30%, I think there's other places that I'd be willing to bet.
All right. Let's go to tight end. Tyler Higbee's had a better role than Allen Robinson, man. Tyler Higbee's been earning targets at a way higher rate. Tyler Higbee's been outsized. And we also have the fact that tight ends break every showdown slate. So, and I'm not even kidding. Like, I don't even grind Showdown that hard, but even I notice that on these Showdown games, it's always tight ends that are going off. They were like, oh, it's Showdown. Let's throw the ball to Travis Kelce 7 times on the first drive last night. Anyways, Tyler Higbee's role was awesome.
And Fortson and Gray scored too.
And Fortson and Gray scored too, exactly. I think Tyler Higbee's a pretty good player. I'm surprised that he's sustained such a high target share through 3 weeks. He's completely iced everyone else. You see here, we don't have anyone else hardly even getting a target for the Rams. So I understand that. On the other side, I'll just give my George Kittle take real quick. The concern with George Kittle is always that the floor is really low. The ceiling is so high. He's another guy who's outrageous after the catch, but volume is always a concern. And with Trent Williams out, of course, the concern is that he's going to stay in to block more, help out their backup left tackle, George Kittle, one of the best blocking tight ends in the game. Still, man, George Kittle at 18%. I'm starting to feel it move a little bit. So, Gary, I'll let you go on tight ends. I feel like a lot of people are going to be interested in Higbee, I guess, with good reason. We have him for 38% and Kittle at 35%. What do you think, Gary?
Yeah, I'm not as into Higbee here, nearly as much as Kittle. And like, I get that Higbee has been a big part of the offense. It's been nice to see for people that invested in him for best ball or just in general. I think a lot of it is just their current situation. Allen Robinson hasn't been getting involved. There's no Odell. There's no Robert Woods this year. He's been a bigger piece of that passing game. But the matchup is not there for him, as Cody astutely noted. Cole Kmet, Will Dissly, and Albert O have been held to 3.3 targets and 2.4 DraftKings points per game so far again in this exact matchup. If I'm playing a tight end, I'd much prefer it to be George Kittle at what is, a pretty reasonable price for George Kittle, and is coming in with less ownership overall than Tyler Higbee here. And
yeah,
I get
about 3% less. Yep.
I get the concern is like his blocking role and everything like that, but history tells us he can beat this Rams team. I know Cody showed me a nice screenshot of all of his box scores against the Rams over the last 4 seasons or so. And there's only been about 2 down games with some major, 14 target, 150 type yard games in this exact matchup. He's had the Rams number. I think he's a solid play.
Yeah.
So.
Any dusty tight ends, Cody? Any Fortson or Gray types that maybe the MME Bros should be looking at here?
God, how great are those Chiefs slates when we can get 2 stone min punt tight ends to break the slate? As always, the Kendall Blantons, the Ross Dwellys of the world, Charlie Warner, I suppose, even if he's active, they got to make your pool just because you can have a sprinkle of these guys if you're windmill slamming 150 lineups into the big large field tournaments. But no, not really much interest in any of these guys.
Yeah. Okay. Defense and kicker on the slate, I think, is going to be relatively popular. Matt Gay and Robbie Gould are both fine kickers who are, I think, a little bit cheaper, maybe a couple hundred cheaper than we see some fine kickers on slates. And then both defenses certainly are in good spots. Cody, what do you think about using 1, 2, or more of these D and kicker spots tonight?
Yeah, I think this feels like a similar spot to the captain kicker slate that had just won, a couple of slates ago, and I think it's a similar spot where you just get enough offensive production where you need the guys that produce. I think it was the Giants Cowboys slate that ended up doing that. You need those guys to produce, and then you get they stall out in the red zone, and you get the 30, 40-yard field goals from guys like Robbie Gould and Matt Gay. We just saw this on last night's slate with Matthew Wright. Like, there's some name value stuff to the kicker stuff, and maybe it was because he's a backup and was just signed off the practice squad, but he was only 10% owned. We saw the kicker on the opposite side, Ryan Suckup.
Yeah,
he was like 38% owned. And both of these kickers carry some name value. I think the game script is going to set up for the field to want to invest in these kickers. So, we're going to see pretty heavy ownership on both of these kickers. And then just one note, reading through Thorne's matchups, his DLO line matchup, sounds like the 49ers have a pretty good matchup here against the Rams offensive line. I don't even mind using the 49ers defense in lineups that have a few Rams. So I'm still probably max 2 here in any given lineup of this group of 4, but I definitely see the case to be made for having exposure to them.
I'm sure Showdown Bros saw kicker captain ship whatever slate that was in a. Generally speaking, Cody, do you think kicker captain can be right ever?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly can, and it was. And I hate to say never on Showdown stuff because anything can win. We see it all the time. Just the craziest stuff wins because just randomness reigns in 1-game samples on a football field. But I think it's a negative EV play just from the perspective that it's going to be owned more often than it's optimal. And then when you do run out these captain kicker lineups, you're generally forced into a very similar roster construction as a lot of other people. And if you're okay with dupes, I totally get it. It's a play that you can make, but I think you're running into a roster construction that is going to be heavily utilized by the field. And for that reason is generally more negative EV.
Yeah. I guess if they're only going to be 1% though, are you really worried about, if captain kicker is only 1%, are you really worried about dupes? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be higher than that, and it was the way it was. It might be a little bit higher than that, and that's the way it was on the Giants slate. It was like 1.4% owned, but it was like 400 of that 1%, runs out the same core of lineups because once you put in Robbie Gould at your captain spot, then you have the ability to play Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, Jeff Wilson, George Kittle. Like at that point, you're just then playing the best plays around the 1% owned captain. And in these large field tournaments, it's still 190,000 entries or whatever it is. And so, yeah, 1% is not a lot, but 1% of 190,000 is still a lot of lineups to try and get different from.
Yeah, once you put it in, that's your lineup almost. Like that's what happened
Yeah.
that night. It was Saquon and CeeDee Lamb and Zeke. They all got in together, and something like that would happen. I would guess once again if a kicker is a captain. I think but I think what Cody said, like they're purely viable in flex tonight, especially because it makes a ton fit when you Google like Cooper Kupp captains and stuff like that. You're going to need these 3-4K plays, and on the low total games, like the kickers definitely stand out more, as do the defenses. So.
See, now you guys are speaking my language. Team play the best plays, right? Now you guys are talking right up my alley. Team play the best plays. Anyways, very, very interesting slate for sure. Ja, you guys can go ahead and get some questions in. We'll have about 5 minutes here for questions before the flag plants. Ross Dwelly is questionable. He did not practice Wednesday or Thursday, Friday. Did get back into practice on Saturday. Did Ross Dwelly a limited practice with a rib issue? We're projecting him in, but that's certainly worth watching when inactives come out for sure. All right. Eric Z says we're higher in the industry than the industry by a good chunk on the 49ers pass game. Certainly concentration is part of it, but I just think that we're projecting a higher pass rate in this spot than other people are. And I really feel good about the way our model handles team pass rate and volume and stuff like that. Like I feel good about it. So yeah, I think we are fine there. I've obviously been lower than everyone else on Debo, and that's another day for me to fight with Leone and everybody about Debo Samuel stuff. But that's for another day. All right. Can we have Adam comment on? No, I never disparage anyone for winning, man. Go out there, play the best plays, and win, man. Happy for Big T. Starting a petition to ban ETR flag plants. You guys have no idea. People we can see on YouTube. Nobody watches except for the flag plants. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about, Neil. Why do you want to ban? I'm fine with it, but that's what the people want. Ownership projections and labs. Cody, I assume we'll get those pushed pretty soon if they aren't already. Yes. He said yes.
They're in. Just pushed. Sorry about that, guys.
Just pushed. Did we go over FanDuel? Just join. We did not go over FanDuel. Again, we do not recommend playing FanDuel one-game slates because of the way it's set up. And I know everybody's tired of me saying this. Because of the way it's set up, it is very, very hard to be a winner long-term in FanDuel one-game slates. However, I know people want to play it. I don't know if you looked at this at all. Cody, any notes for the people playing on FanDuel tonight?
Yeah, Brandon Ayuk is really cheap on FanDuel. And this is the problem, like when we talk about the salary differences, Brandon Ayuk is cheap, so he's a better play, but that's also probably going to inflate ownership over there. So just something to keep in mind. George Kittle, also very cheap, 8,500. Like he's priced around the same price as the kickers and only $1,000 more expensive than Juwan Jennings. Ben Skoranek feels a little bit underpriced over there at 7,500. He's a guy that could certainly get there. But pretty much one for one across the board over there. Although I will say on the Rams running back, I mentioned I liking Darrell Henderson on DraftKings. I like Cam Akers. He's $1,000 cheaper on FanDuel and obviously has the touchdown equity over there.
Ugliest play you're considering tonight. I think I'd like to say that the ugliest play I would consider is Juwan Jennings, but that might not be enough. We might have to go cheaper. I don't know. Gary, is there an uglier play than Juwan Jennings that's actually viable? Not for the Lotto Bros, like an actual play that you'd actually consider.
Maybe Jordan Mason. Like we saw this with, I get Rachaad White's a much better role in general on a better offense, or at least more pass friendly, happy offense than Jordan Mason is. But it's really just Jeff Wilson in front of him. I guess you could say Debo as well. But like for that base down running back work, it doesn't take a lot for one guy to go down on a 1-game slate. Like I'm touting these guys like Craig Reynolds and Khalil Herbert when their guys in front of them on main slates are going to be 40% owned in 13-game slates. Like we can get weird with the RB2, even if the role hasn't been there.
Cody, anything uglier than Juwan Jennings you'd consider?
I talked about the Kyle Juszczyk one. It's ugly, but I actually think it's going to be owned to the point where maybe you shouldn't even be considering that. The Brandon Powell stuff, he's 3,000, which means you actually have to do something. We kind of talked about that on last night's slate. Like these guys that are priced up just enough where maybe even falling in the end zone isn't enough for them to get there. They actually have to be out there and do something with their role. It's kind of a similar story with Ray McLeod. I like Gary Shout with Jordan Mason, 1,200. If he falls in the end zone, that might be enough. But that's one thing to keep in mind. You think you're getting the stone min punt or the cheap punt. They might actually have to do something to pay off that salary, and as opposed to just falling in the end zone or getting a catch. So keep that in mind with the guys like Brandon Powell and Ray McLeod.
Hunter says is 3 captains too little for 150 sets. So I think this is more of a risk tolerance question. You know, people ask these kind of questions all the time. Like, obviously, you are going to spread out your risk the more captains that you have. What's actually optimal? I'm not sure. I think taking a stand, if you have a really good feel on a guy who should be the captain, you should probably go with it. But yeah, I don't know, Gary. What do you think about 150s and how many captains you should have?
Nope, not too little. I think it's a great strategy if you feel good about it. I'm all about small player pools, taking pure stances, getting the combinations exactly how I want to get them. So yeah, I can see what you're saying. Like I'm not MMEing here, but this is definitely one of those slates you can whittle it down to 2 to 4, 2 to 5 captains for sure. I think I said I want to get well over the field on Cup's 21%. So like if I'm going 50, 60% Cup captains as it is, that's a big stand. And then how many more do I really want after that? I'm just basically banking on Cup. So yeah, not at all. I think it's totally viable.
You might be on mute, Adam.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Adam, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, what's your favorite construction tonight, Cody? 4-2, 3-3 was put out there as a suggestion. That would be the chalk construction. What were your favorite construction tonight, Cody?
Yeah, I think my favorite is 2-4. It's really hard to get comfortable with those 1-5 and 5-1 roster constructions tonight. But I really like 2-4. And I have my concerns. I read through Thorne's comments on the DLO line mismatch. I have my concerns. I'll have a couple of 4-2 builds. I'll have plenty of 3-3 builds. But just if I'm only picking one, and then as a means to get unique, I like the 2-4 construction tonight.
By the way, that would be Rams to 2 Rams and 4 49ers. Rams are, 2 49ers and 4 Rams is 2-4. 49ers are favored by 2 points at home tonight. All right. We've talked long enough. Let's get to the flag plant portion of the program. Gary, I will give you the honors.
I'm going to stick to my flag planting tight ends thing that I've been enjoying quite a bit on Showdown slates. And I'm going to go with George Kittle here. I'm hoping that the field remains a little bit off him at, what maybe are a little bit concerned about the blocking role, all that. But at 35% total ownership, 6,600 for what we know his ceiling is. And, this is pure GPP. Like we know that George Kittle's range of outcomes are as wide as most star tight ends that exist, right? Like we see these 2 for 10 games out of George Kittle, but we also see the 7 for 150, 3 touchdown type of games for George Kittle once or twice per season. And I'm hoping that tonight is one of those nights while we get him a little cheap and the field's somewhat off. So I think Kittle adds up to a nice play for me tonight.
Cody?
All right, you talked about this guy as an ugly play. I think he's a fantastic play tonight, and as a way to fit in all the studs that you need to. I think that his teammate, who's $1,000 cheaper, might even be more owned in some of the field sizes that I'm playing. Juwan Jennings hasn't really popped in the box score yet, but is running around on 54% of dropbacks. I think the 49ers will have to pass a little bit more in what I expect to be a little bit of a back and forth affair, even if it doesn't go over the 42-point total. I think Juwan Jennings will be out there in that big slot role a little bit more and has a chance to find the end zone. I think Juwan Jennings will be in the winning lineup tonight.
All right. We never do this, but it's Showdown. I don't have that many guys to choose from. I've already let 2 guys go in front of me. I got a double dip. I mean, George Kittle has 30-point games in his range. He's 6,600, and his captain ownership projection is 6%. His overall projection for ownership is 35%. I mean, come on. Now, I understand George Kittle has a lot, like Gary said, George Kittle has a lot of 4 for 34s in there too, and a lot of 3 for 33s. But man, 40 balls at this ownership at 6,600, you don't get to see that very often, and I think that's definitely in the range for George Kittle. Just such a good player. All right. Double dipping on flag plans. I know that's against the rules, but I'm breaking the rules for this Showdown game. That's going to do it. 4. Showdown breakdown of Jimmy Garoppolo versus Matthew Stafford. 4. Oh, if you want to see the full silver write-up on this game, the Thorne stuff that Cody was mentioning, Cody's full breakdown, all our projections for all the games, be sure to subscribe. There are weekly and monthly options available now. 4. Cody. 4. Gary. I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.